My name is Kathleen. I'm 63 years old. I've been a wife, mother, accountant, counselor, nurse at dawn, and for a long time, I was the only person sustaining an entire house with love and silence. But have you ever wondered what happens when the woman who held everything starts to realize that she is being pushed into the corner of her own life? I found out, and it hurt more than I imagined. Maybe you clicked here because you felt the same discomfort that I felt. That intuition that tightens your chest. That doubt that seems small but insists on coming back every time you close your eyes. You look, you try to ignore it, you pretend it's all in your head, but it is not. It never is. I prepared my son's wedding with my own hands. I sewed details, chose flowers, took care of everything with a full heart. And it was inside my house, in the most sacred place for me, that the biggest betrayal of my life happened. A double betrayal. In this video, I'm going to tell you what I saw, what I discovered, and what I did. Because when the truth came, it didn't knock on the door. She broke in. And after that day, I was never the same woman again. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know something. I didn't get here by chance. I saw with my own eyes what no mother should see. Hours before my son's wedding, while the house was filled with flowers, laughter, and promises, I opened a door, and I found my husband with my son's fiancée. Yes, in my living room, in my home. And when I thought about screaming, when the ground started to disappear under my feet, my son appeared, and he told me a phrase that still echoes like a knife in my chest. "It's worse than you think, Mom." It was there that I knew. What was to come was not just a betrayal. It was a slow, silent descent to the bottom of the abyss. If this story touched you from the beginning, if you feel that you have something inside you that has also been broken by silence, contempt, injustice, so stay with me. It makes me feel like I'm not alone here. Press the like button, subscribe to the channel, not only for me, but for all of us who have swallowed tears at dawn pretending that everything was fine. What I'm going to tell you now, it will hurt, but it will also liberate. I woke up before the sun rose. I don't know if it was the anxiety for Brandon's wedding or that kind of foreboding that only an old woman knows. A twinge in the chest that isn't pain, but it's not peace either. I got up slowly, without turning on the lights. I went down barefoot, feeling the icy wooden floor as if I were stepping into a world that no longer belonged to me. The house was silent, but inside me, everything screamed. I went straight to the kitchen. I prepared the coffee with my hands on automatic, as I did for almost 30 years. While the water was boiling, I looked out the window and saw the garden still covered in dew. There would be the altar. I chose the flowers myself, ordered the hydrangeas from a friend's farm in North Carolina. I wanted it to be perfect, not by Emily, but for Brandon. He deserved a beautiful, clean start. I thought that was what he was getting. The first spoonful of sugar fell out of the cup. My fingers were shaking. I sat alone. That kind of loneliness that doesn't make noise, only weighs you down. I tried to remember the conversations with Gregory that week. There were few. He slept late, said he was solving the company's thing, always with the cell phone facing down, always with that smell of perfume that wasn't mine. It was then that I heard the front door. It was 5:20 in the morning. Gregory entered. Light blue dress shirt, polished shoes. Very well dressed for such an early hour. He carried a bag in his hand, as if that explained something. He saw me sitting and tried to smile, but he looked away. "Are you awake already?" he said. "Always. The coffee is fresh," I replied, trying not to tremble in my voice. He said he went to get a gift for his father-in-law. He invented some excuse. I kept looking at him, and I remembered the first time he lied to me, years ago. The same look away, the same rehearsed speech. That hurt more than any slap. He poured himself coffee and left without saying anything else. He entered the room, locked the door, as if there was something there that I shouldn't see. I stood there, listening to the clock on the wall marking the seconds with cruelty. I got up and went to the backyard. The morning wind was cold but clean. I walked between the chairs, straightened a ribbon, straightened a vase again. Everything that was small, I fixed. But what was too big? I didn't know how to fix it anymore. It was then that I heard Brandon's footsteps. He walked down the stairs slowly, as if carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. The sunken eyes, the slumped shoulders. He didn't look like a groom that day. He looked like a lost boy. "Mom," he said, his voice hoarse. "She'll be coming early today." I just nodded. But inside, something broke. He sat next to me on the porch, and we were silent for a while, the kind of silence that says it all. At that moment, I felt a deep desire to protect my son, like when he was little and cried in the crib at dawn. But now, it was different. I didn't know who or what he needed to be protected from. I only knew that fear was there, between the two of us, with the smell of lies in the air. And me, mother, wife. I didn't know which role to hide in. Sometimes the worst loneliness is this, when we are surrounded by people, but no one really sees us. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever looked inside your house and realized that, despite being there every day, it is as if you have disappeared? If this feeling touched you now, write to me here in the comments. It can be just I've lived it. It's true. It touched me. I read each one with my heart in my hand, because this story, it's not just mine. And at that moment, between the smell of cold coffee and the sound of birds singing without knowing what would come, I understood. My son's wedding day would also be the day when the truth would knock on the door. But nothing would prepare me for what I was going to see right away. Brandon returned from the balcony, found me still in the kitchen, with my hands on the coffee cup that had already cooled. She sat in front of me with the same silence as before, but this time with red eyes, as if she had not slept at all, or as if she had cried. For a moment I thought he was going to tell me something, but he stood there, quiet, staring at the tabletop as if the world were collapsing on him. And then, in a low, choked voice, he asked me something that made my heart stop. "Mom, do you think Emily really loves me?" I didn't know what to answer. That was like a punch in the stomach. I looked at him trying to find some sign that it was just groom's nervousness, that silly fear before the altar. But what I saw on his face was despair. Honest. Profound. Brandon began to vent slowly, as if taking a weight off his chest. She said that in the last few months she was distant, that everything she said sounded rehearsed, that she didn't seem excited about the wedding, only with the guests, with the photos, with the details that would give visibility to the event. He said that sometimes he caught her laughing at Gregory's jokes in a different way, that they understood each other too quickly, that she liked to talk to him about subjects that Brandon himself did not understand. She admires him, Mom. Sometimes I feel like she's marrying me, but wanting something else. It was as if the pieces began to fall into place inside my head. All those little glances exchanged between Emily and Gregory, the muffled laughter, the disappearances at the same times. I always preferred to think it was all in my head, that I was being exaggerated. After all, Gregory was my husband, and Emily, my future daughter-in-law. They wouldn't do that. Would? Brandon squeezed my hand over the table. "Mom, do you think I'm being paranoid?" I swallowed. I looked at him as a mother, like the one who spent sleepless nights when he was a baby, who held his hand when he had stitches in his forehead, who cried in secret when he left home for college. I wanted to protect him from the pain, but at that moment, I was also a woman. And as a woman, I knew what a look with desire was. I had seen that look before, and it wasn't between daughter-in-law and father-in-law. I hesitated, but he said, "Son, when we love, we feel when we are being loved back. But it also feels when it's being used." He lowered his head. We were silent for a while. I wish I could hug him and erase everything, but there was something in the air, something that had not yet been said. I felt that Brandon knew more than he was telling. And that question, it was just the beginning. What he was about to reveal could change everything. And when he finally told me, I understood that nothing, absolutely nothing in that house, was what it appeared to be. That morning, I was trying to keep my head busy. I forced myself to believe that if my hands were busy enough, arranging a flower here, tying a bow there, maybe my heart would forget to hurt. But don't forget, we can pretend to everyone, except for ourselves. I stood on the porch arranging the details of the garden chairs, telling myself that it was just pre-wedding anxiety, that everything would pass, that my son was going to be happy. But then I heard the side gate slam, and it was as if the air got heavier. Emily had arrived, not inside the house, as any bride about to get married would enter, but from behind, discreetly, as if she doesn't want to be seen. That already lit something up for me. I dropped the flowers, went around the side of the house, and hid among the hydrangeas that I planted with so much affection. I crouched there, like a child about to be discovered, but with my heart beating like a betrayed woman. Through the living room window, I saw Gregory. He had his back turned, fiddling with a bottle of wine. He took 2 glasses from the cabinet that I inherited from my mother, and there was Emily, sitting on the couch, with a smile on her face that I never saw her give to my son. She laughed. He laughed with shining eyes. Gregory poured the wine, sat down next to her. He slowly ran his hand over her back, as if it were routine, as if that sofa, that house, that moment was already of the two. My knees trembled. I felt the blood disappear from my legs. That image was burned in my retina, as if someone had scratched fire in my soul. And yet, I couldn't move. Time has stopped. They were so close, so intimate. It didn't even feel real. But it was. It was more real than anything I tried to build. And then, in the reflection of the window glass, I saw another face. Up there, at the top of the internal stairs of the house, was Brandon, stationary, property, observing everything. He saw it too, and by the expression on his face, it was not the first time. I wanted to run to him. I wanted to pull him away from that scene, but he didn't move, and I understood at that moment, with the pain of 1,000 knives in my chest, silence was now necessary. The cry I wanted to give, I had to wait. The scandal they deserved would have to be saved. That was no longer a pain just mine. It was the ruin of an entire family about to fall apart. But before the collapse, before the destruction, I needed to understand. How long had this been going on? And what, exactly, did my son already know? I was still standing among the hydrangeas when I felt the footsteps behind me. It was Brandon. His face, my God, it looked like it was made of wax. No color, no life. He looked at me as someone who carries the weight of the world on his back. I was going to say something, anything, but he was faster. Mom, I already know. I've known for weeks. I thought I had heard wrong, but he confirmed it. He said that almost a month ago he began to notice signs, times that matched, conversations that stopped when he arrived, too many excuses, and that he went after the truth, with their own means. I asked Aunt Susan for help, that friend of hers in Jacksonville, remember? Who worked for years with private investigation. He hired a detective, a discreet, professional, experienced woman. She kept an eye on both of them. And what did he discover? Brandon said he would rather never have seen it. They met in hotels. They had a cell phone chip just between them, hidden. They made money transfers, dinners in expensive places, intimate conversations recorded in audios. Gregory said he was going out with clients and was going to meet Emily. Emily said she was going to solve details of the dress and went straight into my husband's arms. There are photos, Mom. There is video. It has everything. I have it all in store. My heart beat so hard that it felt like it wanted to tear my chest from the inside out, but I took a deep breath. He continued, I didn't want to tell you like that. I didn't want you to see what you saw today. Brandon apologized to me for the pain, for the delay, for having hidden it from me. He said he tried to confront Emily twice, but she denied it, cried, manipulated, and in the end, he thought it best to wait, observe, act right. That's when I saw it. My boy. He was no longer a boy. He was a wounded man, a man with courage, and I understood that we were both in the same boat, sinking together. But I also understood that it would not be in the scream that we would get out of this. We will let the wedding happen, Mom, but not in the way they think. He said it with a look I had never seen on him. Cold, calm, determinate, as if he had seen everything he needed to see. I held his hand. For the first time that morning, I felt strength. Because now, it was no longer me alone against this world of betrayals. Now it was the two of us, mother and son, the deceived, those who gave too much love and received poison. I'm here opening my heart, telling my story with every detail, without hiding the pain. So if you're there on the other side, listening to all this with affection, give me that support. Leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. I still have a lot in store to tell you. Things that even the police didn't know. Things that even Emily didn't dream I would find out. Because what came next? It was even more cruel. And that's where the name Dana comes in. Have you ever heard that name? Well, prepare your heart, because when this woman appeared, Gregory's mask fell off for good. That night, after everything I heard from Brandon, I went up to my room as if going upstairs carrying a life on my back. I sat on the edge of the bed, looked around, and all I saw was history. That patchwork quilt on the bed I sewed on the nights when Gregory traveled to those brokerage events. They said it was networking. Today I know it was something else. The desk in the corner of the room, where I spent hours doing the household taxes, organizing the bills, stretching the money so as not to miss Brandon, while Gregory risked himself with promises of easy profit, dubious deals, big bets. I remembered the time he arrived all excited about a project in Miami. He said he needed a push, and I, blinded by love, agreed to mortgage the house. I signed the papers trembling, but believing that he would do the right thing. I always believed. I was that woman, the one he trusted, the one who held everything in his chest, the one who preferred to remain silent rather than create confusion, the one who said, "It will pass," even though she knew she wasn't. And now I looked at all this and only felt a bitter taste, a taste of humiliation, because while I took care of the house, raised our son, cleaned up the pieces of his promises, Gregory created another world, a world where I didn't exist, where he was free, where another woman received what he took from me. I thought about the calls he said were from customers, always on Fridays, always after 6. I thought of the nights I slept with the lamplight on, waiting for him to come through the door. He did, but with the smell of perfume that wasn't mine, and I pretended not to notice, because to love is also to be silent sometimes, or that's what I believed back then. I also remembered little Brandon, asking why his father didn't come to the school play. I made excuses, smiled, said he was busy. I defended Gregory even when he didn't deserve even a shred of forgiveness. I did everything to keep our family standing. But no one can sustain a house alone for 30 years without breaking inside. And I broke. Often. Only now. I was no longer going to sweep the shards under the rug. I got up, walked to the mirror and looked at myself. The white hair, the wrinkles in the corner of the eyes, the tired skin. But there, in that reflection, I haven't seen a weak woman. I saw a woman who survived all this in silence, and that now, finally, she was ready to speak. But what I didn't imagine, it was what came later. Because when the truth about Dana came out, I realized that Gregory didn't just cheat on me as a wife. He betrayed me as a woman, as a mother, as a human being. And that part, no one was prepared to listen. The next day, just after lunch, Brandon came up to me with a laptop in his hands. He said I needed to see some things. We sat in the office, that cramped little room I used to organize the papers in the house, and he started to open the files. First there were photos. Gregory entering a hotel in Charleston with Emily. Once, twice, 7 times. Always the same pattern. Late afternoon, rental car, cap on face, the care of those who are already used to hiding. Then parking videos. A hug that lasted longer than acceptable. A quick kiss, but full of intimacy. Emily laughing, fiddling with the necklace, touching his face like it was something natural. I saw it all, no blinking, without shedding a tear. Because crying, at that moment, was no longer of any use to me. What really hurt came later. Brandon opened a portfolio called Finance. He showed the statements of the retirement fund that we built together. 30 years of savings, from every penny saved. And there, on the screen, was the detour. $42,000 disappeared over the course of 2 years. Installments. Hidden. What's more, in several transfers, Gregory used my name. He forged my signature, as if I were an accomplice in my own ruin. Brandon pursed his lips. Another window opened. "This is worse, Mom." And he clicked on a bank receipt from 16 years ago. A monthly, automatic, direct payment from the joint account to a woman named Dana Bledsoe. The value? $1,200 a month. For 16 years. I kept looking at that name. Dana Bledsoe. I had never heard of it. She was not a friend of the family. She was not a distant cousin. Someone. Someone who was receiving our money, my money, in a systematic, regular way, like someone who receives a pension. But pension of what? Brandon explained that when he saw the name, he pulled the plug out of her. He used a contact from the detective in Jacksonville. Dana lived in Hilton Head, an hour and a half away. She worked in a small salon. She was discreet. Divorced. He had a daughter named Haley. And that's when Brandon pulled up a picture of the girl. That everything turned to fog around me. She had Gregory's smile. The eyes. The chin. Even the way he stood with his arms crossed, as he did when he was impatient. Haley was 16. Gregory had been paying Dana since the girl's birth. At that moment, I understood. He had another daughter, out of wedlock, and he supported both lives with the same money. The money I saved with rice and beans lunchboxes. The money I didn't spend on myself to pay for Brandon's college. The money of our old age. And the worst? I would never have found out if it weren't for my son's sad look that morning. The pain of betrayal is sharp, but the pain of lying sustained for years, this is deep, silent, corrosive, because it doesn't just hurt the present, it rewrites the past. And suddenly, everything you've experienced starts to look like a big staging. It was at that point that I said to myself, you're going to go all the way with this, Kathleen, but it goes with class. Without lowering himself, without losing his dignity, they're going to fall, with the same silence with which they betrayed you. And if you're still here with me, if you hear this story, something inside you also stirs. Stay, because what's to come is even stronger. I know I've already revealed a lot, but the most remarkable part of my life, the one that no one ever knew, that's what comes now. Because I decided to meet Dana, and what she told me, everything changed. Do you think you've seen betrayal? Just wait to see who really knew everything. On the eve of the wedding, the house was filled with voices, laughter, clinking glasses, chairs being dragged, the smell of rosemary and roast meat coming from the kitchen. I walked from one side to the other, smiling, offering wine, replacing napkins, as if I were the owner of a theater about to receive the main play. And maybe it was. The difference is that this time, I wasn't on stage. I was in the audience, watching. Emily arrived wearing a cream, tight, modern dress, impeccable makeup, hair tied up with a pearl barrette that Gregory gave, and that she said she bought in New York. Lied. I saw the little box days before, hidden in Gregory's drawer. He said it was for me. It wasn't. Her parents also arrived. Elegant, serious. His father, a retired federal judge, the kind of man who talks little and looks too much. The mother, refined, rigid. I sat at the head of the table, between their forced elegance and the silence of Brandon, who could barely disguise his soul sickness. Gregory was next to Emily. They exchanged looks, restrained smiles. I saw when she, under the towel, touched his leg with her foot. He did not back down. On the contrary, he squeezed the wine glass and disguised it with a joke about the weather. I smiled. I served more wine. I set the candle in the center of the table. I swallowed the nausea. I pretended not to see. How I learned to do my whole life. But inside, every second was a spinning knife. When dessert was served, everyone toasted the couple. To young and true love, her father said. I drank in silence. Brandon barely touched the cup. Later, already alone in our room, I would slowly undress, each button looking heavier than the last. Gregory came in, walked over and held my hand. He looked into my eyes with that rehearsed way he always used when he wanted to hide something. It's going to be a beautiful day tomorrow, Kath, he said, as if he were talking about a family holiday. I smiled, a smile that was not mine, and I replied, yes, it will. And that's when I understood, with a cutting clarity, that has silence that is louder than any scream. I was raised to keep everything quiet, but in that instant, something inside me began to move. A strange calm, a new certainty. I knew it was the last time that man touched me as if he were my husband, because the next day, he was going to find out that an injured woman can even bleed in silence, but she never dies in silence. And let me ask you something now, looking here in your eyes, even if through the screen. Have you ever had to swallow the pain to protect the little dignity you still had left at a table full of people? Have you ever sat at a dinner party smiling while your heart broke in your chest? If you've experienced something like this, comment here. He only writes, I know how it is. I understand you. It's true. Sometimes we just need to know that we are not alone. Because when the next morning came, nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I was going to see in that room. Nothing. I woke up before the sun, in that silence that only the dawns of Savannah know. The whole house slept, but I couldn't. My body seemed light, but my soul weighed like lead. I sat on the edge of the bed for a few seconds, listening to Gregory's breathing beside me. He slept peacefully, as if he did not carry any guilt, like someone who believes he will never be discovered. I got up slowly, feeling the cold floor on my feet, and went to the bathroom. I turned on the dim light over the sink, and there, right in front of me, were our brushes. A blue one, mine. A black one, his, the black one. That would be the end of all lies. I took a deep breath, put on the disposable gloves I had hidden in the bottom drawer days before, and with all the calmness in the world, took his brush. I held it as if it were a radioactive piece of our history. I put it inside a transparent plastic bag, one of those the detective had given me. I closed it carefully, removing the air so that it didn't make a noise, and kept it inside the sink drawer. I stood there looking at the mirror. It was the first time in 28 years that I had seen this real woman. Not the devoted wife, not the mother who held the home alone, not the one who swallowed tears while smiling at visitors. There was Kathleen, the betrayed woman, the woman who finally understood that trusting too much is also a kind of slow death. I went back to the room, left the gloves in the bag hidden inside my bag, and lay down next to him. I didn't sleep for a minute. At 6:30, I got up, showered, and dressed as if it were a normal day. A light blue dress, a pearl necklace that Gregory had given me on our 10th anniversary. Today I knew it was bought after a weekend he swore he had spent at a conference. I left home before 8. He said he was going to pick up extra flowers at the market. Lie. I drove to the Publix parking lot on Waters Avenue. The investigator was there, inside a fogged silver sedan, windows darkened. I opened the back door, sat down, took the bag out of my bag, and handed it over. She didn't say anything. He just put it in another package, sealed it, labeled it, and looked at me as someone who recognizes courage. I took a deep breath, and then I left. I returned home as if nothing had happened. The garden was almost all set up. The white chairs lined up, the altar with flowers that I chose myself, white hydrangeas, old roses, eucalyptus, all too beautiful for the kind of truth that would be revealed there. I stood there, looking at the altar, that structure that Gregory and Brandon set up together weeks before. I remembered their laughter beating wood, the afternoon sun, my joy, which now seemed naive, almost childish. That altar was more than decoration. It was a symbol of the life I believed I was building. It was the stage where the biggest lie in my history was going to collapse. And for the first time, I felt no pain, felt clarity. The pain had already done its job. Now it was the truth that guided me. I saw Brandon through the living room window, running his hand over his face nervously. He saw me in the garden and smiled, a broken but firm smile. The kind of smile that a son gives when he decides to face the world alongside his mother, even if the world collapses. The researcher sent me a short message. Delivery to the laboratory made. Result in 4 hours. 4 hours. 4 hours before the wedding. The perfect time for fate to sign its own name. I walked slowly across the lawn, touching the petals of the flowers that I had tied myself with white ribbon, and with each step, she felt a piece of the old Kathleen being left behind. I knew that when that exam came back, nothing else in the world could be denied, nor by Gregory, nor for Emily, not even for myself, and little did I know that, in addition to fatherhood, the laboratory would bring a detail that would change everything again. But this, I only found out about this hours later. I remember the smell of eucalyptus that late morning, mixed with the sweet scent of the roses I had chosen myself. The garden was almost ready. The decorators walked from one side to the other, hanging the last lamps, arranging the chairs, fastening ribbons that flickered slightly in the breeze coming from the river. I walked slowly, as if checking details, but inside, I walked as if preparing for a war. And for the first time in my life, I was not afraid at all. I felt such a deep serenity that it seemed unfit for what I was about to do, but it was true, because when the truth comes, it comes without trembling. It comes steady. It is the lie that trembles. Brandon met me near the flower arch. He was carrying a briefcase, one of those simple brown cardboard ones, but it seemed to weigh tons. When I looked into his face, I saw a boy trying to be a man, and a man who should never have been hurt in that way. He handed over the briefcase without saying anything. I opened it right there, with the sound of birds in the background, as if it were an ordinary afternoon, but it wasn't. Inside were the detectives' updated reports, and among them, something new: bank records from a recent attempt to transfer assets, a significant amount, an amount that Gregory was trying to shift to a new account. On behalf of Emily, my hands turned cold, but my face didn't move. I just flipped through it, reading every issue, every date, every invented justification, and I realized that he wasn't just cheating on me emotionally. He was betraying me legally, financially, morally, as a husband, as a father, as a man. Brandon spoke quietly, almost in a whisper. "Mom, he was going to run away with her after the wedding." I closed the folder carefully, as if keeping a sacred document, and in that instant, something inside me lined up. I understood that it wasn't just about pain. It was about justice. A silent, precise justice, without shouting, without scandals, until the right moment. I grabbed my cell phone and walked to the shade of the balcony, where no one would hear me. I called my lawyer, a firm, objective woman, whom I liked precisely because she never sweetened anything. She answered on the third ring, and before she could ask anything, I said, "You can get ready. We will move forward today." We scheduled a meeting for the next morning, and right there, on that balcony, while the guests hadn't even arrived, I made the decision that would change everything. I went back inside the house, went to the office desk, took a deep breath, and sat down. The divorce papers had been ready for days, but I was waiting for the right time to sign them. My name at the top of the page seemed to look back at me, as if asking me if I was ready. I was. I took the pen, clenched my fist, and with the same calmness of someone who writes a shopping list, I signed. Line by line, page by page, Kathleen Ann Miller, my perfect handwriting. My future returned to my own control. When I was done, I put everything in the large envelope, sealed it with the palm of my hand, and put it in the back of my purse, behind the wallet and lipstick that I rarely wore. It was like storing a loaded gun, not a weapon of violence, but of liberation. I left the office with my head held high. I had no weight on my shoulders, not at that moment. He had a purpose. Gregory walked past me in the hallway, adjusting his tie, smiling the way he has always fooled the whole world. He opened his mouth to say something, but I just passed by him, as if I was just another guest. And for the first time, he seemed to notice that there was something different about me, because I didn't do what I've always done. I didn't smile. I didn't disguise it. I didn't give room for the illusion to keep breathing. I walked to the garden to review the schedule with the event coordinator. My voice was calm, almost soft. I looked at myself in the windows and saw a woman who no one imagined was about to blow up the entire lives of those people with a single truth. And you know, at that moment, I felt something I didn't expect to feel. Pride. Proud to have survived so long in silence. Pride for finally having found strength in the place where before, there were only fractures. And since I'm here opening this chapter so deep in my chest, let me ask you something. If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward. Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. And it makes me feel like I'm not alone as I relive it all. The sun began to descend slowly in the sky, dyeing the garden gold. I could hear the first cars arriving in front of the house. The guests, the elegant clothes, the expectations, all coming in the direction of a truth that no one was prepared to face. And as I walked to the side gate, adjusting the scarf on my shoulders, an icy sensation ran down my spine, because there was only one piece missing, the final piece, the only one that would really tie all the lies. And at that moment, my cell phone vibrated in my pocket, an unknown number, the laboratory. It was time, but what that call brought, it was even more devastating than I imagined. The call from the lab still echoed in my ears as I stepped out into the backyard, trying to breathe like the world hadn't just been turned upside down again. Brandon saw me from afar and came to meet me, with that expression of someone who already knows that the truth never comes alone. I couldn't speak there, in the middle of the white chairs, so I nodded my head, and we both went to the garage, where the light was low, and the noise of the wind drowned out any secrets. I told him the result, each word with the weight of a stone falling into a well too deep to see the end. It wasn't just the confirmation of the secret daughter. There was another detail. A discovery that showed that Gregory had been preparing his own escape long before Emily came into our lives. Brandon turned pale, but not surprised. It was as if he was already emotionally prepared for it. as if his heart had learned not to expect anything good from his father. He put his hand on my shoulder and just said, "So now there's no turning back." I just nodded. Hours later, Denise Carver arrived. Short, firm, a former federal agent. This woman had a posture that made anyone think twice before lying. She walked through the back door as if she were part of the family. Brandon greeted her with a quick hug, and I took her into the dining room, where we scattered all the documents, reports, screenshots, and photos on the table, as if we were putting together a macabre puzzle. Denise ran her fingers over each paper without haste. Her gaze was clinical, cold, calculated. When she got to the bank report with the attempts to transfer to the account in Emily's name, she just muttered, "He wasn't in love. He was building an escape route." Then he opened the envelope with the DNA. I didn't say anything for a few seconds, and then he let out one, This here destroys any defense." She was the one who suggested the screen. "Say that you will show slides of the couple. Nostalgia works as an emotional distractor." The idea was perfect, because the wedding would already have lighting, sound, structure. No one would suspect anything. She asked Brandon to send everything digitally to her later that afternoon. She would edit herself, organize, put dates, times, audio, whatever was needed. I kept looking at it and thinking how strange life is. Sometimes, the one who saves you is not the one you have loved all your life, but the one who appears when the ground has already turned to ash. And in the middle of all that preparation, I felt a twinge inside my chest. Something between pain, indignation, and determination. It was there that I realized that what was about to happen was not just a revelation. It was a reckoning with everything I had swallowed for almost 3 decades. And you know, there is a phrase that came to me as a whisper at that time. Something that I need to tell you, because maybe it makes sense to you too. Sometimes life takes time to deliver the truth, but when it comes, it never arrives weak. It comes like thunder. And that's why, if you're here so far, stay with me. Because what comes after this thunder will still move you a lot. When Denise left, taking a digital copy of everything with her, Brandon and I went to the cafe where I had scheduled to meet Emily's parents. They were formal, polite, carried that posture of people who occupy important positions and believe that the world works around their own surname. They sat down, ordered coffee, and soon began to talk about the wedding, about how Emily was radiant, intense, busy with preparations. I just watched. Their every word felt like a stone being laid over a castle that was already doomed to fall. It was then that I planted the first seed, not of confrontation, but of doubt, the simplest, the most dangerous. I waited for a moment of silence, took a sip of my coffee, and asked, "Do you think that she's really happy?" The two looked at each other, as if listening to something they didn't expect. Her mother arranged her napkin on her lap. The father stood still, looking at me with that evaluative look of a retired judge. They did not respond immediately, and I knew that in that second, something in them had cracked. Not because they suspected the betrayal, which never crossed their minds, but because deep down, they had already noticed strange behaviors in their daughter, but preferred to call it marriage stress. We returned home with the feeling that the first piece had fallen, even if very slowly. The sun was already lower, painting the sky with those orange colors that make us wonder how it is possible for life to be so beautiful and so hard at the same time. The house was full of people arranging things, testing sound, holding flowers, but inside me, the silence was absolute. Silence and focus. It was as if I was walking down a narrow hallway, and at the end of it, I knew exactly what awaited me. And as difficult as it was, I wasn't going to deviate. I went upstairs to the bedroom, closed the door slowly, sat on the bed and looked at the pen drive that my lawyer had left with me earlier. Within it was the complete destruction of a farce that lasted for nearly 30 years. And there was also the liberation that I didn't even know it was still possible to feel. But most impressively, it's just that, just when I thought I had seen the worst, something happened in that house that showed me that there was still a hidden truth, an even greater truth, and she was closer than I imagined. I drove to Hilton Head with my hands firmly on the steering wheel, but with my heart swaying like sail on a windy day. The park where we arranged to meet was near the pier, a quiet place, full of old trees that made enough shade to hide any truth, or reveal it. When I parked, I saw a woman sitting on a wooden bench, her hands clasped together, looking at the ground as if praying in silence. It was Dana. hair tied up anyway, simple clothes, and an air of tiredness that I recognized from afar, the kind of tiredness that only life knows how to put in us. She looked up as I approached, and in that instant I realized she knew exactly who I was. He didn't get up, he didn't smile, he didn't try to justify himself. I just said my name, in a whisper, Kathleen, and I nodded my head, sitting next to her like two women who didn't choose to be in the same boat, but now had to row together just to keep from sinking. A few minutes later, a girl appeared walking slowly across the lawn. Haley, 16, a sketchbook under his arm, headphones hanging around his neck, that sweet and distracted look typical of those who still believe that the world has more poetry than evil. When she got closer, she took off her headphones and smiled, a smile that hit me like a punch, because it was Gregory's exact smile as a young man, the same dimple, the same luminosity on the face, and she greeted me with such a beautiful politeness that my chest tightened. The three of us sat there, under the shade of a huge tree, and Dana started talking. Her voice trembled at first, but then she found strength. She said she met Gregory 17 years ago when she was working as an administrative assistant at a real estate agency in Charleston. He said he introduced himself as George Miller, a recently divorced broker looking to start his life over. He said that he never mentioned his wife, much less son. She said that months later, when she found out about the pregnancy, Gregory was scared, but he didn't run away. He promised discreet support, said that social exposure would harm him, made excuses about his imaginary ex-spouse, about litigation, about reputation. And she believed. Because when we are alone in the world, sometimes we even believe in promises that were born rotten. He had visited Haley since he was a baby, always as Uncle George. She took toys, paid for medical appointments, helped with school supplies. Haley spoke of him fondly, imagining nothing but kindness. And it was there, on that simple wooden bench, listening to every bit of that story sliced into small sufferings, that I understood the real size of the moral abyss that Gregory had dug. He didn't just cheat on me. He didn't just betray Brandon. He betrayed that girl, who grew up calling her own father uncle. He betrayed Dana, who believed in a made-up man. And he betrayed himself, because someone who builds so many lies ends up getting lost in them. Haley opened the notebook and showed me some drawings. I will never forget that moment. There were landscapes, trees, beaches, but in the middle of the pages, there was an illustration of him, from Gregory, and on it she wrote in small print, Uncle George, my hero. That destroyed me in a silent way, and it was at that moment that I needed to take a deep breath, close my eyes and feel the weight of everything that this teenager should never have carried. Because there are memories that stick to us like tattoos, memories that we don't ask for, but that shape us forever. And I know that you who are listening to me must already have one of those inside your chest too. So if any memory like this has marked you, if you have experienced something similar or know someone who has, share it in the comments. Sometimes sharing a piece of memory is the only way for it to stop hurting. As we got up to leave, Haley hugged me, a shy, light hug. But it was as if she delivered into my arms all the years of lies that Gregory had spread along the way. I got into the car with burning tears streaming down my face, but for the first time, they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of clarity. I no longer had any doubts. Gregory had to answer for every life he destroyed, for every truth he stole, for every person he deceived. And that strengthened something inside me. One certainty, a determination. As I drove back to Savannah, the sun set behind the palm trees, tinting the sky dark orange, and it was there, on that stretch of silent road, that I knew without a shadow of a doubt what would happen at the wedding the next day would not be just a confrontation. It would be a scoring. And what I didn't know yet, it's just that, even before the ceremony began, a new revelation would fall on me like a sudden storm, shaking everything again. The house looked different that late afternoon. The lights hung between the trees, formed a golden corridor, and the white chairs gleamed like bones lined up in silence, waiting for the spectacle that no one knew they were about to watch. I walked slowly, feeling the fabric of my teal dress slide down my legs. I chose that color for a simple reason. It was the exact shade of the sea on stormy days, elegant on the outside, revolted on the inside. People arrived in droves. I saw cousins from Boston I hadn't seen in 10 years, Gregory's colleagues from the real estate agency, old neighbors, Brandon's childhood friends, everyone so neat, so smiling, so convinced that this would be a day of love, union, and eternal promises. I greeted them lightly, but inside I just watched, like someone watching a play whose script they already know by heart. Every fake hug, every laugh too loud, every look of sympathy seemed part of an impeccably assembled theater. But the last act, that would be mine, and there would be no rehearsal. Gregory arrived in the garden as the quartet began to play, in a light gray suit, dark blue tie, hair combed as if trying to cover up decades of sins with gel. He seemed calm, safe, even proud. He greeted everyone with that trained smile, that posture of a respectable man, that charm that deceived me, Brandon, Dana, Haley, and now he was trying to deceive even the federal judge who would be his father-in-law. I stood there for a few seconds watching the scene, Gregory reaching out to Emily's father, and the judge shaking his hand firmly, saying something that made them both laugh. It was almost comical, because the man who entrusted his daughter to that future son-in-law had no idea that he was handing over his family inheritance to a faker. And for a moment, I felt sorry. Pity that father who, like me one day, believed he was looking at an honorable man. Emily appeared soon after, and I had to take a deep breath. She was beautiful. I can't lie about that. A white silk dress, simple and luxurious at the same time, hair tied in a loose bun with locks falling on purpose. Light makeup. It looked like something out of a magazine cover. She walked with confidence, radiating that youthful beauty that enchants any environment. I watched her and thought, if she knew what awaits her, but no, she didn't suspect anything. And maybe that was what made it all the more surreal. She greeted some guests, had a glass of water, adjusted the bouquet. At no time did she look at Gregory guiltily, because people who are used to lying learn not to tremble. The coordinator announced that everyone should be seated, because the ceremony would start in 5 minutes. And there I felt the air change. I felt as if an invisible silence had rested on the shoulders of every person in that garden. I walked to my seat in the front row, sat up straight, hands clasped in my lap. I didn't want to tremble, and I didn't tremble. Brandon, on the right side of the altar, was pale, a handsome, dignified pale of someone who knows he's about to do something that will mark his entire life. He met my eyes, and I waved slowly. It was a simple gesture, but it was our silent pact. We are together, until the end. Then the music began, the traditional, soft, delicate. The balcony doors opened, and everyone stood up. I got up too, because I wasn't a dream destroyer. I was just the keeper of the truth. Emily walked in alongside her father, and the entire audience sighed. I stood firm. There was no emotion at that moment, only prediction. Prediction of what I needed to do. Prediction of what would happen when the first seconds of truth appeared on that giant screen behind the altar. And it's curious, because when we experience something like this, so extreme, so loaded with meanings, the mind seems to slow down. I listened to Emily's footsteps over the wooden corridor as if they were clock strikes. Each step said, "It's coming." Every look from the guests said, "This will be unforgettable." Gregory's every gesture, adjusting his tie, taking a deep breath, cracking a smile. "Read, I'm safe." And that gave me a terrible calm. Calm of those who know that lies can deceive the world, but it does not deceive time. When the officiant asked everyone to sit down again, I adjusted my bag next to the chair. Inside, next to my wallet, was the envelope with the divorce papers, and the pen drive with everything, every test, every crime, each lie recorded in video, audio, and document. I breathed slowly, looking around. Everything seemed so perfect, so beautiful, so carefully arranged. It seemed like a dream, but I knew. That was exactly why it needed to collapse there, because perfection based on lies does not deserve a future. And as the officiant began to talk about love, fidelity, purpose, and unity, words that afternoon, sounded like pure irony, I felt a shiver rise up the back of my neck. And it wasn't fear, no doubt. It was a sign that the moment was approaching, because someone was still missing to enter that garden, someone no one expected, someone who would make the world stop when he appeared. And it was just when I heard quick footsteps coming from the side of the house that I realized The true beginning of the end was about to happen. The celebrant had barely finished the sentence. That phrase that always seems so ceremonial, so symbolic, so far removed from any real possibility. If anyone here has anything to say against this union, when I felt my body move before my mind even followed. I stood up, slowly, no rush, no shaking. The chair behind me made a faint sound as it retreated, and that noise, so small, echoed like thunder through the whole garden. 200, maybe 300 people turned their faces to me, and I walked. My every step sounded as if I was crossing my own life towards a door that had always existed, but that I never had the courage to open. Brandon watched me petrified, but with his eyes filled with a silent strength, as if to say, "Go, Mom. Now it's your turn." Gregory, standing next to me, leaned forward and whispered through his teeth, "Kath, what do you think you're doing?" I didn't answer, because there was no longer any room in my body for explanations. The truth was the only language I would speak from then on. I climbed the first step of the small improvised altar, and the celebrant took a step back in surprise. The bride, Emily, froze with her smile still stuck on her face, as if the expression had been ripped from her face and left there, useless. Her father stood up, his face tense, already sensing that something terrible was about to happen. When I got to the center, I turned to everyone, tucked the scarf over my shoulders, and said, in the firmest voice that has ever come out of my mouth, "I have a reason." The silence that took over the garden was not just any silence. It was a silence that draws air, that weighs on the chest, that makes the nerves vibrate, that silence that precedes the collapse of an entire structure. Gregory reached out to me, nervously, trying to smile as he always did when he wanted to control the narrative. "Kathleen, dear, please, sit down. Don't mess up." I held up a small remote control, the same one Denise had given me earlier in the afternoon. One button, one click, a lifetime about to undress in front of everyone. "You're the one who's messing it up," I replied in a whisper that seemed to scream so calmly, and I pressed the button. Behind me, the screen that was supposed to show slides from Brandon's childhood lit up with an intense white light. There was a slight interference, a hiss, and then the image appeared. Gregory and Emily, on the sofa in our living room, in our home, her hand on his face, his hand on her waist. The kiss. A deep, intimate kiss, no doubt about it. A kiss that no son-in-law should give to his own future daughter-in-law. The audience exploded. Screams. Sighs plucked as if they had been punched in the stomach. Hands covering mouths. Bowls falling to the ground. Emily's mother put her hands to her head and let out a, "My God," so torn that even the wind seemed to stop to listen. Her father stepped forward, his expression in absolute shock. Emily paled in a way I had never seen in a living person. Gregory became a blur of despair. He ran over to me, trying to wrest control from my hand, but I took a step back, and before he could touch me, Brandon emerged. My son, his son, and he held Gregory's arm, with a strength that I never imagined existed in that boy I carried in my arms. "Don't touch it," Brandon said. It was so firm that even Gregory froze. The screen continued to display the photos, one after the other, like emotional bullets fired into each guest's chest. Gregory and Emily entering the hotel in Charleston. Gregory paying everything in cash. Emily smiling in the parking lot, clinging to his neck. Gregory holding the room key. I could hear the conversations breaking into fragments around me. Is this real? My God, she cheated on her own fiancé. He cheated on his wife for the son's fiancé. I took a deep breath, and the next file started running. Bank statements, transfers, cash withdrawals, the forged signature, my signature, used to steal from our retirement fund. Gregory began to scream, pointing at me, at the screen, in any direction that could save him. "That's a lie. This is montage. She is unstable. She's making it all up because..." But Gregory couldn't finish it, because the following image appeared. The DNA report, the unquestionable percentage, the name Haley, the photo of her, smiling with that sketchbook on her lap, the daughter he hid for 16 years. It was as if the world had been sucked into a hole. The silence now was different. It was the one that comes after the impact. Heavy, scared, no air. Emily fell to her knees, Her father stood still, as if his heart had froze, and Gregory took 2 steps back, staggering, as if trying to escape from his own image stamped on a giant screen. I stood there, standing there, looking at that man I once loved, and who now seemed only empty. A man who destroyed 2 families, 3 perhaps. I don't know. A man who believed that his lies would never find the sun. He tried to run. He tried to leave the stage, disappear between the chairs, escape from it all. But it was just when he took the first step to escape that something, or someone, blocked his path. And then, right there, I knew that the real reckoning was about to begin. When Gregory turned to flee, running between the chairs like a cornered animal, I felt something strange inside me. It was not a triumph. It was not pure revenge. It was a kind of inner silence, as if my body finally understood that everything I had been through, the nights waiting, the lies swallowed, the excuses made, the betrayals I pretended not to see, had brought me exactly there. People were screaming. Emily, lying on the floor, sobbed so loudly that it seemed as if her crying came from years of accumulated masks. Her father tried to lift her up, astonished, while her mother trembled beside her, repeating, "No, no," not as if he wanted to undo reality with the power of the word. And Gregory, Gregory. He ran without looking back, stumbling in his own despair. He went through the side gate, pushed guests, tried to make his way to the car as if he believed he could still escape. But before he reached the driver's seat, a figure appeared right in front of him, steadfast, property, like a wall that the truth has raised. It was Denise, the detective. Light coat, straight posture, look of someone who has seen criminals of all kinds trying to run from their own destiny. He tried to swerve, but she took a step to the side, blocking the way. "Gregory Miller," she said, in that calm voice that seems to come from the depths of an authority that doesn't need to be shouted out. "You will not run away from the truth." He still tried to laugh, nervously. The same laugh he used when he wanted to turn the tables on the scream. "You don't boss me around, you—" But she raised her hand. He didn't touch him. He didn't have to. "I have already sent the documents to your broker's office. They are already analyzing it. And the police, well, let's just say that the report on counterfeiting should be of great interest to them." Gregory's face contorted. I saw something break in there. It wasn't regret. No. It was ego wounded, the only thing he truly loved. Meanwhile, in the garden, Emily was falling apart. She grabbed the hem of her own dress tightly, as if she wanted to get into the earth. "That's a lie! This is montage. This is envy. You want to destroy my day." Her father tried to lift her up, but she beat him in the chest with an open hand, hysterical, shouting something about not being to blame, not having a choice. He promised he would leave the old woman. I heard, each word like a stylus. Brandon was standing near the altar, trying to stay upright, teary-eyed, but not falling. My son looked at the woman he was going to marry, and the father he lost, and I knew that that moment marked the ruin of all the innocence he still had in his chest. I walked down the aisle again, holding the microphone that someone had dropped in the rush. I lifted him up, felt his weight in my hand, light, almost fragile, and spoke calmly, not to humiliate anyone. That was not my wish. It was just the truth, for the first time, gaining a voice. "The theft started years ago," I said. "Money from our fund, money that I saved with lunchboxes, with nights of extra work, with sacrifices that he never knew." People were silent again. It is curious how the truth has this power. It silences even the wind. "He forged my signature," I continued. "He transferred funds to hidden accounts, and he supported a second family, a family that didn't know he already had another." The screen behind me now showed the image of the DNA certificate, the staggering percentage, the name. The genetic coincidence is impossible to deny. Haley, the daughter who never received his last name, the daughter who grew up believing that she had only a kind uncle who showed up with gifts. I felt the audience tremble. I felt the indignation spread like fire in dry grass. And for the first time, I felt something close to liberation. It was then that I realized how far I had come. I was there, in front of my family, friends, strangers, but without any shame. All the shame was his. I was just the witness of a new life being born. Mine. And sometimes when I think about it, I realize how there is strength in us, where we don't even know how to look. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. Enjoy this video and subscribe, and let's make this story reach those who need it. Because no one deserves to swallow so many lies alone. Gregory, realizing that there was no way out, pushed Denise and tried to run to the lawn, but he was prevented by two guests who, indignant, held him by the arms. And at that moment, I understood something profound. The truth does not need violence. The truth comes alone, and it drags everything. Behind me, I still heard Emily scream, "It wasn't supposed to be like this. It wasn't supposed to end like this." And when I turned my face, I saw her father approaching, with an expression I had never seen on him. Nor anger, nor sadness. Something different. Something heralding a new revelation. And what he said to me, there in front of everyone, completely changed the course of that afternoon. The chaos seemed to have stopped in time, but I knew it wouldn't last. I was already so immersed in the pain and revelation that I could hardly perceive what was happening around me anymore. Gregory stood there, motionless, as if reality had closed in on him, swallowing it all. He didn't talk. He didn't look. He didn't even defend himself anymore. It was as if the words had completely failed, and all that was left for him was a deep silence, the same silence he had imposed on so many over the years. But there was more. Something was still moving in the air, something that could not be seen at first glance, but which, in time, would end up being the end of the story. As I said, the truth always arrives, but it brings with it a series of other truths. And it was in that moment of stagnation, amid the shock, the noise of the screams and whispers, that I realized that this afternoon wasn't just about to end. It was about to turn the tables in a way I would never have imagined. From the corner of the garden, two discreet but firm figures began to move towards Emily. Plainclothes policemen, as Denise had warned me. Emily, who was still on the ground, now trying to compose herself, saw the men and her face instantly changed from panic to a state of absolute denial. He tried to get up, tried to swerve, but the police were there to do what I knew needed to be done. She was taken away, with her hands handcuffed, without a scream, without a cry for help. The shock was so great that even the wind stopped for a second. "You can't do that. This is all lies. My father will. She kept repeating it, as if she still believed that her words could change the situation. But her words couldn't. The truth was there, stamped on every document, on every movement, on every photo that had ever been projected on the screen. And I, who had always been a calm and collected woman, felt such a strength inside me that I barely recognized who was there. I felt that it wasn't just me who needed to watch this. It was the world. The world needed to see it. Brandon was next to me, and I felt his hand squeeze mine. "Mom, now it's over. Justice won." I didn't have to answer. At that moment, there were no more words, only a silent understanding between us. The pain he carried in his soul, and that now began to dissipate, due to the certainty that he was no longer alone on that path. It wasn't just him who had been deceived. It wasn't just him who had been betrayed. Me too. And now, the only thing left was what I had always been able to do. Resist, until the last moment. The house was in absolute silence, as the officers carried Emily to the car. The world seemed to have retreated into that small space of grass, where everyone was in shock. The wedding ceremony, which everyone expected to be the highlight of the day, had turned into a public nightmare, not in applause, but in justice. I turned to Gregory, expecting him to say something, anything, but he was silent, looking at the ground, like a defeated man. But most intriguing of all is that his silence was not one of regret. It was fear of what was to come. He knew there was no way to escape. I knew that there was no way I could escape what was happening myself, but it no longer mattered. Everything was finally aligned. He had already gotten so lost in the lie that he couldn't realize that his biggest enemy wasn't me or Brandon, but time, which always demands the truth back. I looked at my son, the man who had been the reason for my existence, the point of resistance and love that I carried for so many years. "We did it together, my dear," I told him with a small smile, but filled with a truth far greater than any feeling of sadness or pain. He didn't answer me immediately. but he hugged me. A firm hug, as if, finally, all that had fallen into place for him too. As if the burden had been divided between the two of us. It was no longer about a desperate mother or a lost child. It was about liberation from something that had been imprisoned for too long. I don't know how long it was before the last words were spoken, until the cops left with Emily. But in that hour, what seemed like an eternity, I understood, with devastating clarity, that it wasn't just going to be a marriage that would fall apart that day. No, it would be a lifetime, a whole story, and somehow, justice, which I thought would never come, found me there, next to my son, in front of all those who once believed lies so well told, that even I bought them myself. I knew the end was coming, the real end, the one that really mattered, the one who would still bring the last missing piece, something that, when revealed, would change the course of this story even more. And as hard as it was to wait, I knew that this latest revelation would be the final touch for the truth to become, once and for all, the starting point for all involved. What was left of the ashes of a lifetime of lies was heavier than I could have imagined. When it all happened, when the evidence came out, and the truth spread like wildfire, it seemed like the world around Gregory was falling apart as fast as he had always believed his image could be raised. The first few days were like a blur of news, phone calls, lawyers, interviews, and goodbyes. He lost his job. It was not just any corporate decision. No, it was dismissal for cause, for fraud and forgery. His name was crossed out of the pages of several local newspapers, and those who once admired him have now turned their backs, as if getting rid of a mistake. The image of the successful man was replaced by that of a traitor, not just to his wife, but to an entire town that trusted him. Emily's company was the first to react. They sued her for embezzlement, contract fraud, and the amount of money she had embezzled over the past few years. When the scandal spread, more than half of the contracts she had were undone, and she was brought to justice. The local media, which had previously seen her as a promising young woman, now looked at her with the same revulsion with which they looked at Gregory. Not that she didn't deserve it, but it hurt in a different way, because deep down, I knew that she was also a victim of his lie, as I was, and Brandon. She didn't know that she was just one piece in a much bigger game. Or did he know? I don't know, but the truth came with a price, and she paid. Emily's father, the federal judge who has always been a respected figure, did not escape the storm either. The news about his daughter's involvement, about the business he thought he was protecting, about the name he thought was so inviolable, made him leave the scene sooner than he would have ever imagined. He announced his retirement early, trying to get away from public shame, but humiliation was inevitable. I saw him once, months after the scandal, in a cafe. He was older than I remembered, the line of his face more marked. His gaze, which had always been that of a strong man, was now empty, as if life had taken him away. I didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He looked at me for a second, perhaps expecting some reaction. But what could I say? I had no more words of consolation for him, not after everything that happened. His family had also been destroyed. What was left there was only the weight of shame. But what was left for me? What should I feel after seeing it all fall apart? What was real in this pain, in this struggle for justice? If in the end the feeling I had was that nothing could give back what I had lost. The legal fight continued, of course. I found myself, once again, facing the papers and lawyers, but now, in a very different scenario. I filed a civil lawsuit against Gregory, trying to recover some of the money he had embezzled from our retirement. I knew it wouldn't be easy, that he would dodge and defend himself, but the documents were there. The evidence was in front of me, and when the judge in the case ordered the return of a good portion of what he had taken away, not all of it, but enough to ease the financial pain, I realized that, at least, I was no longer at the mercy of a man who treated me as if my life was worthless. But deep down, what I wanted most was not money. It was not the legal victories that gave me any consolation. What I really wanted, what I really needed, was peace. And that peace, I knew, was far away from me. It was as if a part of me had been torn apart in all that. Gregory may have lost everything he had, but I also lost what was most deeply rooted in me, the trust in what I believed to be my life, my family. Every day, when I woke up, I asked myself, what is left of all this? What is true now? It was difficult to answer that question. The scandal was a catalyst for change, but the pain of betrayal, the emptiness of those broken certainties, dragged on with me for a while far beyond what I care to admit. The city seemed to have forgotten all this soon after. The media went after another scandal. The gossip changed focus, and life went on. But for me, there was still a silence. And this silence weighed more than any scream. I knew things would never be the same again, and maybe I didn't want them to be. In the midst of all this confusion, Brandon and I reconnected in a new, more mature way, more aware of what really mattered. He helped me with the house, kept me company on lonely nights. We finally found ourselves in a space where pain was still present, but where there was also the beginning of something new. Something that was not defined by betrayal, but by reconstruction. But the peace that I sought so much, she was still out of reach. It was like a weight on my soul that I didn't know if I would ever be able to leave behind. And it was at that moment, in the midst of rebuilding my own life, that I knew there was still more to discover, more to face. I knew my fight wasn't over, and the revelation that was about to happen would be the last piece of that puzzle. I just didn't know yet how much this truth would mess with everything I had ever believed to be right. I just knew that somehow the future was about to surprise me in a way I never expected. I remember that Sunday as if I remembered the first day after a long fever, when the body still hurts, but finally breathes. It had been a little more than 2 months since the disaster, since the public implosion of my family, since the day I stopped being a wife and became, again, just Kathleen. My new home on Tybee Island still smelled of fresh paint and old wood. It was small, but sunny, with a balcony that overlooked a little piece of the sea. After everything I've been through, I just wanted a place where the noise of the whole world wouldn't reach me so easily. That Sunday, I woke up early to prepare the table. Nothing luxurious, ever again. Just what reminded me of who I was before the lies. Light blue cotton towel, dishes inherited from my mother, flowers I picked in the backyard. I made apple pie, that old recipe that I only prepared on peaceful days. Maybe that's why I hadn't done it for so many years. When the smell took over the kitchen, I felt something tame in my chest. Not happiness, not yet, but a truce. Brandon arrived just before noon. He knocked on the door as he had always done since he was a boy. 2 knocks and a pause. And when he entered, he seemed lighter. Not fully healed, but walking. He brought by the hand a sweet, quiet-voiced girl named Laura. She was a librarian in Savannah. She looked at me with respect, with tenderness, as someone who understands the sacred territory of a marked mother. I smiled at her, as if my son was offering me a little breath of the future. But the one who really made my heart tremble was the third person who walked through the door. Haley, the daughter I didn't bear, the one I never imagined existed, the one that was born from a lie that lasted more than a decade, and that, even so, was not to blame for anything. She was standing on the doorframe, holding a small box of colored pencils, wearing a lilac sweater, and with eyes too big for so much history in the world. She looked younger than her 16 years, with that fragility that only children who grow up carrying secrets know well. Brandon approached her with such instinctive care that my chest tightened. He touched her arm, like an older brother guiding the youngest. "Come in, Haley. Here you are safe," he said. I didn't cry at that moment. I felt like it, but I didn't cry. I just took a deep breath and opened my arms. She came to me slowly, as if fearing rejection. When he finally got close enough, I touched his shoulder and said, "You are welcome here, dear. Very welcome." I don't know if it was the way I spoke, or if she had been expecting to hear something like that, but she lowered her head and smiled. And in that smile, so small, so shy, I recognized what broke me the most throughout that nightmare. No child deserves to be hidden. We all sit at the table, and for a few minutes, few, but precious, we forget the past. Haley told me that she liked to draw waves and lighthouses. Laura talked about the books that kept arriving damaged at the library. Brandon said he was thinking about taking a course in garden architecture. And I, silently, looking at each face, felt something I didn't expect to feel so soon. Peace. A humble peace. Almost shy, like a visitor who still doesn't know if he should enter. As I served the pie, I realized that this moment, that table full of patches, of new beginnings, of broken people willing to start over, was truer than any dinner I'd ever served at my old home. There was no facade there, nor a lie, nor rehearsed smiles. There was only what was left after the windstorm. And strangely, that was enough. I sat and watched my 3 young people talking, laughing, sharing space as if life was, very carefully, trying to stitch together the pieces of something that still had a chance to flourish. And it was by looking at them, at that little mosaic that was born out of the ruins, that I realized that maybe my story wasn't about destruction. Maybe it was about reconstruction, about truth, about allowing the new to come in, even when the old still hurts. But in that tender instant, something began to grow inside me, a sensation, a foreboding, like a cloud that forms slowly before rain. I wasn't sure what it was, but I knew there was still one piece missing, one last meeting, one last truth to be told. And that truth was about to knock on my door sooner than I imagined. I see myself sitting here, alone, but not lonely. The house around me is smaller than the one I used to have, but there's something about it that fulfills me in a way I didn't know about. My heart is at peace, and today I can breathe deeply without feeling that constant weight. What once seemed impossible is now my reality. Forgiveness. I looked at the past and left behind the ghosts, the lies, the pain. But above all, I left the time I wasted with the illusion that life would go on as if nothing had happened. I was the wife who believed, who cared, who loved without hesitation. But now, I'm something else. I am myself, without the chains of the past binding me, without the broken promises defining me. I am free. What I have learned, my people, is that time does not destroy us. No, what destroys women is the fear of facing what is in front of us. What destroys is the idea that when we see the truth, we will lose everything. The lesson I bring with me is simple. Sometimes, true strength is not in resisting, but in allowing yourself to see. See what it is, even if it hurts. Because when you see the truth, when you face what's happening, that's when the real reconstruction begins. You don't build on lies. You don't rebuild life from what is false. And when you find what's real, you find your freedom. It's not easy, and no one said it would be, but it is the only way to move forward. And, you know what? I chose to move on. Now, I'm going to ask you a favor, who have followed you this far. If my story touched any part of you, if you recognized yourself in any word, leave a like there. It is like a hug that warms and supports this channel. And sign up, go, as an invitation to the next coffee. We can meet again, talk, and who knows, even share a few more stories. Comment from where you are watching. Tell me. Let's create this support network of people who understand. And don't forget to activate the bell so you don't miss it when the coffee is brewed again, okay? I stay here with a lighter heart, but also stronger. And you? Are you ready for the next chapter? Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.